Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yasodanandana Prajajanaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yasodanandana Prajajanaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yasodanandana Prajajanaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Kishore Kishori ki jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Marani ki jai, Gonitai ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this morning we're reading from Canto 10, chapter 68, text 14 through 15, and text 16. So we'll be chanting text 14 together. Sanjaya Sandvayitva Tutan Namaha Sanadhan Vrishni Pungravan Naichat Kurunam Vrishinam Kalim Kali Malapaha Sandvayitva Tutan Namaha Sanadhan Vrishni Pungravan Naichat Kurunam Vrishinam Kalim Kali Malapaha Sandvayitva Tutan Ramaha Sanadhan Vrishni Pungravan Naichat Kurunam Vrishinam Kalim Kali Malapaha. Please chant. Santvayitva Tutan Ramaha Sanadhan Vrishni Pungravan Naichat Kurunam Vrishinam Kalim Kali Malapaha Santai Vayitva Tutan Ramaha Sanadhan Vrishni Pungravan Naichat Kurunam Vrishinam Kalim Kali Malapaha. And the word for word, Sanjayitva, calming, 2, but, Tan, them, Rajaha, Lord Balaram, Sanadhan, suited in armor, Vrishni Pungavan, the heroes of the Vrishni dynasty, Naichat, he did not want, Kurunam, Vrishinam, between the Kurus and the Vrishnis, Kalim, a quarrel, Kali, of the age of quarrel, Mali, the contamination, Apaha, he who removes. And I'll read text 15. Jagama Hastinapuram Ratena Ditya Varkasam Brahmanai Kulu Vridhaischa Vritai Sandra Ivagrahai. And the translation for text 14 and 15 is as follows. It's by the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. the last line of text 15 was Vritai Chandra. My computer changed it to an S. Lord Balaram, however, cooled the tempers of the Vrishni heroes who had already put on their armor. He who purifies the age of quarrel did not want a quarrel between the Kurus and Vrishnis. Thus, accompanied by Brahmanas and family elders, he went to Hastinapura on his chariot, which was as effulgent as the sun. As he went, he appeared like the moon surrounded by the ruling planets. And then text 16. Gatva Gaj Vayam Ramo Bahio Pavanam Astitaha Udavam Preshayam Asa Dhritarastram Bubutsayam. And the translation for text 16. Upon arriving at Hastinapura, Lord Balaram remained in a garden outside the city and sent Uddhava ahead to probe King Dhritarashtra's intentions. And the purport by the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada writes, quote, when Lord Balaram reached the precincts of the city of Hastinapura, he did not enter, but stationed himself in a camp outside the city in a small garden house. Then Balaram asked Uddhava to see the leaders of the Kuru dynasty and inquire from them whether they wanted to fight with the Yadu dynasty or to make a settlement, close quote. Om Gyanatimirandasya Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshuru Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swam Rupa Gadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Yuta Padkamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragutam Vitam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radha Vrindavanishvari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Taribhyascha Kripa Sindhubheva Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimata Roma Padaswami Iti Namine Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimata Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So looking at texts 14 through 15, there's a commentary by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, which is the following. So quoting Srila Vishwanath. Having pacified the Vrishnis, Balaram, along with a group of Brahmanas and elders, went to Hastinapura because he did not want a quarrel between the Kauravas and the Vrishnis. Close quote. So very simple. Now, particularly, Lord Balaram, he pacified King Ugrasena because there's mention he pacified the Vrishnis. So particularly, he pacified King Ugrasena, who was heading the Vrishnis, and the best of the Vrishnis. So several other eminent personalities in the Vrishni dynasty. One of the reasons for discouraging them from going out in armor is that he had affection for Duryodhana, his pupil. So this is very interesting. There's a mention that when Lord Balaram went to visit King Janaka, we had read this much earlier on in the Srimad Bhagavatam. King Janaka was very dear to Balaram. So when he went to visit King Janaka, who was dear to him in Mithila, he stayed there for several years and honored by his affectionate devotees, the words used in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And it was at that time that Duryodhana learned the art of fighting with a club from Lord Balaram. So that was in the 57th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So that's one of the reasons for Lord Balaram discouraging the Vrishnis from going all out in their armor to go and fight with the Kurus. He had a connection with Duryodhana, having taught him club fighting, and says for several years. Now, Lord Balaram, in pacifying the Vrishnis, because that's part of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, it takes the form of, and this was what we read today, to quote, cooling the tempers of the Vrishni heroes who had already put on their armor. So they were completely geared up for battle, but he cooled their tempers. That's the expression that was used in the narration in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So the reason they had donned their armor was because they were angry. Upon hearing that Samba, Lord Krishna's son by Jambavati, had been forced down from his chariot, and that four of the warriors that had forced Samba from his chariot, they also struck down his 4 horses, and one of them struck down his chariot drive, and another warrior broke his bow. So they put Samba in that condition. So this was the means the Kurus chose to achieve the end they had spelt out. So, in their words, this end or this goal that they had been aiming at was, and I'm quoting them, the Kurus, they worded it this way: this ill-behaved boy has offended us, forcibly kidnapping our unmarried daughter against her will. And arrest this ill-behaved Samba. So that was the end that they had in mind: arrest this ill-behaved Samba. And that was given earlier on in the same chapter in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So the goal the Kurus had set out shaped the means they had employed to achieve that goal. And that means that employed was of arresting Samba, who had kidnapped Duryodhana's daughter Lakshmana from Swayamvara's ceremony. And we just heard the means they utilized. And I'll go into it in more detail. It was the means employed, all the warriors banding together and pulling Samba from his chariot, and the end itself, which was to arrest Samba, that had angered the Vrishnis. Because Samba had in fact displayed his extraordinary prowess, standing up to Duryodhana and his companions. So there was the reason for the anger of the Vrishnis. And there's a description of Samba's displaying his prowess, and it's given. This is the description. Twanging his wonderful bow, heroic Samba struck with arrows the 6 warriors headed by Karna. He pierced the 6 chariots with as many arrows, each team of 4 horses with 4 arrows, and each chariot driver with a single arrow. And he similarly struck the great bowman who commanded the chariots. So all alone, in one foul swoop, he had managed to penetrate the bodies of each and every warrior, the horses, the chariot drivers, and he struck the chariots. So interestingly, the enemy warriors, the Kuru warriors, they actually congratulated Samba for this display of his prowess. and Srila Jiva Goswami, he notes that Samba drew his bow in a splendid manner, and that when he pierced the 6 chariots with his 6 arrows, all the Kuru warriors praised him simultaneously. It was just spontaneous because it was such an extraordinary display of his prowess. So to achieve their end, the Kuru's end, to arrest Samba, the 6 warriors all fell upon him, as I've described, and with great difficulty they tied him up and took him and their princess back to the city. So Srila Prabhupada gives a breakdown of the status of the fighters that may shed light on the anger of the Vrishnis. So this is Srila Prabhupada describing. There are different grades of fighters, including Maharati, Ekarati, and Rati, classified according to their fighting ability. So these Maharatis, which means these 6 warriors that pulled Samba from his chariot, meaning they were Karna, Shala, Buri, Yagnaketu, and Duryodhan. They were Maharatis, and they were, of course, also guided by the great fighter Bhishma Dev. They could fight alone with many thousands of men. Each one of them fell into that category of being a Maharati. But all of them combined together to arrest Samba. And Samba, he was also a Maharati, but he was alone and had to fight with the 6 other Maharatis. So Srila Prabhupada notes, and this is what Srila Prabhupada's words were, still he was not deterred when he saw all the great fighters of the Kuru dynasty coming up behind him to arrest him. He wasn't deterred. Now, Srila Prabhupada also writes, the fighting was conducted in the Kshatriya spirit, so all the fighters banded together, although it was improper. They obliged Samba to get down from his chariot, now broken to pieces. So that helps to understand why the Vrishnis were angry with the Kurus. Just the nature of these 6 Maharatis coming behind Samba, who was all alone, also Maharati, but forcing him down from his chariot. So Srila Prabhupada uses the word, it was improper. So there's the reason for the anger of the Vrishnis. Now, this end, so that was the end, just looking at the end that the Kurus had in mind, which was to arrest Samba, and the means that they employed. And according to the analysis of Srila Prabhupada, is an improper means. Now, Lord Balaram had an end in mind too, or a goal in mind too. And his one was no quarrel between the Kurus and Vrishnis. So that was the goal he had in mind. And to achieve this end, the means Lord Balaram employed was to surround himself with brahmanas and elders on a quest to ascertain the intentions of the Kuru. So this means of having brahmanas present would also help, and these are the words of Srila Sanatana Goswami, fools come to their senses. These are the words of Srila Sanatana Goswami. And it would also indicate, just by virtue of the fact that Lord Balaram was using this means to achieve his end, this means of having been surrounded by brahmanas, and the elders, it would immediately indicate that he had no desire to fight. It's not that he was going there with his army. He was arriving with brahmanas and elders. Now, there are 3 reasons given by Srila Jiva Goswami as to why Lord Balaram chose this particular goal of no quarrel between the Kurus and Vrishnis, because that was his goal, his end. So the first reason is that Lord Balaram himself is the remover of quarrel. and quarrel being a part of this age of Kali. And the second reason for Lord Balaram's goal or end of not having a quarrel between the Kurus and the Vrishnis is that he's the destroyer of Kali personified. And actually, Kali personified is Duryodhana and his pride. And even though Lord Balaram is that destroyer, he chose not to kill Duryodhana. And the reason this is so is because of Lord Balaram's merciful nature. So those are the reasons given by Srila Jiva Goswami as to why Lord Balaram chose this particular goal of no quarrel. It's very much part of his being, his merciful nature, and the fact that he actually is the personality that removes quarrel from the age of Kali. Now, there's a consequence that's spelt out if the personality of Kali is allowed to act as an executive head or a man god. And this is given in the Srimad Bhagavatam in the 17th chapter of the 10th canto. So this is if one permits the personality of Kali to act as the head of a state. Irreligious principles like greed, falsehood, robbery, incivility, treachery, misfortune, cheating, quarrel, and vanity will abound. So this consequence has implications in the Kali Yuga age, because even if the state is impartial for having a particular faith, let's say, the state cannot be impartial to the principles of religion. So the state may allow all different religions or different sects to exist, but it can't be impartial in terms of the principles of religion. And in the Kali Yuga age, what actually will take place, and this is Srila Prabhupada explaining, the executive heads will be indifferent to such religious principles as, and there's a listing of what those religious principles need to be, are, and what the state should be ensuring is maintained. So these are those religious principles. There should be austerity, there should be cleanliness, mercy, and truthfulness. But because the state in Kali Yuga, or states in general, are indifferent to these religious principles, Srila Prabhupada points out that the state will in fact be the patron of greed, of falsehood, of cheating and pilfering. So that's a consequence of allowing the personality of Kali to act as an executive head, which is what has transpired even in our short existence in the age of Kali. It's very apparent that these particular irreligious qualities are very prominent: greed, falsehood, cheating, pilfering. So the method that was employed by Lord Balaram to achieve his end of no quarrel between the Yadus and Dynasties is given in text 16. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur states, Balaram sent Uddhava to learn the intentions of Dhritarashtra. Note. And Srila Prabhupada, he explains how the Kurus considered the means end problem, because this is what we're looking at. There's a goal, an end, and then there's means you're going to employ to reach that end. So this is Srila Prabhupada's explanation of how the Kurus gave consideration to this means end problem. So they first looked at their goal. So they gave consideration to the goal, that they want Samba arrested. And their considerations of the consequences of doing so went like this. So this is them consulting with each other. And Srila Prabhupada gives this explanation in or insight in Krishna, the Supreme Personality of God. And he writes, the Kurus counseled amongst themselves that upon his arrest, the members of the Yadu dynasty would be very angry with them. There was every possibility of the Yadus accepting the challenge and fighting with them. So they gave further consideration to this possible consequence of them achieving their end or aiming for this arrest of Samba. So this is the Kurus counseling amongst each other. If they come here to fight with us, what could they do? The members of the Yadu dynasty cannot equal the members of the Kuru dynasty because the kings of the Kuru dynasty are the emperors, whereas the kings of the Yadu dynasty are able to enjoy only their land, and because we have granted that land to them. So do you notice how illogical it is? They're pointing out that the members of the Yadu dynasty cannot equal the members of the Kuru dynasty. And the reason they're giving is on the basis of status. So they're not looking at whether it's the strength or the capacity. They're looking at, oh, well, the members, the kings of the Kuru dynasty, they're emperors. But the Yadu dynasty, they've just got a little portion of the land. They're sort of restricted in their movements. So what can they do? Of course, that's not completely insightful. It's not looking at what the proper criterion is for success in a battle, which would clearly be military prowess. So they gave consideration to whether the means they chose to achieve the end would produce consequences that would be undesirable. So that was the consideration. Would there be something undesirable as a consequence? So this is them counseling amongst each other. If they come here, meaning the Vrishnis, to challenge us because their son was arrested, we shall accept the fight and teach them a lesson so that automatically they will be subdued under pressure, just as the senses are subdued and checked from being engaged in anything other than meditation upon Lord Vishnu. So this is something of the reasoning process of the Kurus, where they are looking at the consequences that will arise from this goal that they have to arrest Samba. So you can see that they're extremely confident, and in fact, they have a very demeaning attitude towards the Yadus. So that's Srila Prabhupada gave that nice breakdown of what the counseling was that took place amongst the Kurus. Now, Balaram is using a means that would achieve the end he's seeking by sending Uddhava to Dhritarashtra. And the reason for going to Dhritarashtra is because Dhritarashtra is the root of Duryodhana's foolishness. It was Dhritarashtra's desire for the kingdom that was the root of Duryodhana's foolishness. And that's a reason that Srila Jiva Goswami gives for why Balaram sent Uddhava to Dhritarashtra. So there's an explanation given. The sons of Dhritarashtra, especially the eldest Duryodhana, hated and envied the Pandavas. And the blind and weak-minded Dhritarashtra, he wanted his own sons, not those of Pandu, his deceased brother, to inherit the kingdom. Now, Pandu had died at an early age, so the 5 children, Yudhisthira, Bhima, Arjuna, Nakula, and Sahadev, they came under the care of Dhritarashtra. So in effect, for the time being, Dhritarashtra became the king because the boys who were to inherit the kingdom, Pandu having been the king, so they were the rightful heirs of the kingdom. They were too young. So they came under the care of their uncle Dhritarashtra, and it was Dhritarashtra who for the time being became the king. Thus, the sons of Dhritarashtra and those of Pandu, they actually grew up in the same royal household. Both were trained in the military arts by the expert Drona, and they were counseled by the revered grandfather of the clan Bhishma. Now, the goal Balaram had him considering the means. So here's how Balaram's thinking is. So Srila Prabhupada writes like this: Lord Balaram wisely thought, let me go there and see the situation, and let me try to see if the fight can be settled by mutual understanding. And here's the explanation of Lord Balaram's thinking of how he's considering this particular end that he wants to achieve of no fighting between the Kurus and the Yadavas. So here's Lord Balaram's thinking. His idea was that if the Kuru dynasty could be induced to release Samba, along with his wife Lakshmana, then the fight could be avoided. He therefore immediately arranged for a nice chariot to go to Hastinapur, accompanied by learned priests and brahmanas, as well as by some of the elders of the Yadu dynasty. He was confident that the members of the Kuru dynasty would agree to this marriage and avoid fighting with the Yadus. So this gives some insight by Srila Prabhupada into Lord Balaram's consideration of whether his end of having no quarrel between the Kurus and dynasties could in fact become a reality. So in his estimation, it was possible. It just had to be that the Kurus had to be induced to accept the marriage. Then fighting would be avoided. And he was pretty confident that the Kurus would agree. So see the contrast between Lord Balaram's thinking and those of the Kurus. Very different, because they have different goals in mind, and they have a different attitude, and they're envisioning a different future. So as Lord Balaram proceeded towards Hastinapur in his chariot, there was that nice description that we read. He looked like the moon in the clear sky amongst the glittering stars. So he's completely resplendent and shining. And when Lord Balaram reached the precincts of the city of Hastinapur, he did not enter. So you can see the caution, the respect, the care with which he's approaching the problem. He stationed himself in a camp outside the city in a small garden house. Then he asked Uddhava to meet with the leaders of the Kuru dynasty and inquire whether they wanted to fight with the Yadu dynasty or whether they were willing to make a settlement. So he sent his envoy. So clearly Lord Balaram did not consider any other goal to be desirable. This was the goal he'd set his mind on. No fighting between the Kurus and the Yadus. And the interesting thing is that Lord Balaram is in a very unique position, because it's explained that he actually gave pleasure both to the Yadus and he gave pleasure to the Kurus. So he was a perfect personality to go and try and achieve this end of a very peaceful settlement that would both respect the marriage of Samba and also prevent the possible fighting on the part of the Kurus who wished to actually fight with the Yadus because they were not so willing to accept that marriage. Now, Srila Prabhupada gives some insight into a kind of fundamental problem that's there, particularly with hearing the thinking of the Yadus. So even though Lord Byram's confident he can avoid the conflict, we heard how the Yadus were thinking, how they were seeing that they were going to achieve their particular end with great ease. So this is Srila Prabhupada's insight. When we wish to get rid of the frenzy of hate, we must be prepared to give up the frenzy of so-called love. So one may ask them, what does this mean? So he gives an example. So this is, of course, from the time of the last century, the most prominent personality that had a particular goal in mind that seemed laudable, but it actually took a very twisted turn. So this is the example that Srila Prabhupada gives. The frenzy of the love of Hitler's own countrymen has produced the concomitant frenzy of hatred for others. And the present war is the result of the dual side of a frenzy of love and hatred. So the two go together. They're loving their leader, but the way it shaped itself was then to actually start hating those that were different within the same country. So hence the wars. And that's, you could say, summarizes the war one hears about even in our current time. There's a frenzy of love for a leader, and then it leads to hatred to others that are not of the same ethnicity in a particular country. So this is Srila Prabhupada's conclusion. When we wish to get rid of the frenzy of hate, we must be prepared to give up the frenzy of so-called love. So the position of equilibrium, free from hatred and love, is attained only when men are sufficiently educated. Meaning when men are educated to see the soul within the body. So you have to go past that idea that you're loyal to somebody who represents your ethnicity, your values, etc. And then you have to hate others who are of a different ethnicity and may have whole different values. And so the this is a very interesting thing that Srila Prabhupada is bringing up, because you notice through this particular narration of the consideration of the means-end problem, or end-means problem, there's a hatred of Lord Balaram and Lord Krishna that's actually very difficult to eradicate, even by the Lord himself. I mean, there's this consideration of, killing Duryodhana, and Lord Balaram's reluctant to do it. So this is the very interesting thing, that even the Supreme Lord has difficulty to eradicate this hatred of himself and his devotees. So that's something that emerged from looking at these particular verses. If there's any thought on the matter, or if we can expand on it, this was as much as came to me in looking at these verses. We have the clanging of the heating unit. We have slight anxiety about persons who enter. Go ahead.
It's quite something that in general you have this strong relationship between two persons, and in general there's some sort of a dynamic of reciprocation when that relationship is there. And we see the relationship between Lord Balaram and Duryodhana is throughout a long period in the Mahabharata, when Lord Balaram became Duryodhana's, both Duryodhana's and Bhima, he was his, guru or warrior type of guru, and and have a relation with both. But among the two, Duryodhana was the sort of best student of Lord Balaram and became very dear to Lord Balaram. And so there was a strong relationship there. But the character of Duryodhana became quite apparent, especially uh, especially in this case, and much later also became very apparent as uh, throughout the time that, I mean, even when Lord Balaram was educating both of them, that was during the period of time that Duryodhana was doing all kinds of um, schemes to destroy the Pandavas. So his character was very apparent, and nevertheless, Lord Balaram became close, so there was a close relationship. So that's sort of one wonders. Of course, there's always the answer that these are the pastimes of the Lord, and but in this situation, we're going to see how, headed by Duryodhan, who was heading that the party of the Kurus that were arresting, and it was his daughter, and how they insulted Lord Balaram. And so, it's more like a one-sided type of relationship. Lord Balaram is feeling very merciful and positive towards, even considering, that, yeah, we have a strong relation. They will listen to me. So, and later, Duryodhana still insulted Krishna. Much later, when Krishna went to negotiate also the the Pandavas and the Kurus before the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So, so it's quite something that although this personality of Duryodhana was so offensive and so proud, and it's still, even till the end of the battlefield of Kurukshetra, Lord Balaram was someone inclined to, you know, um, benefit in one sense. I'm thinking, I'm talking maybe too much, but uh, Lord Balaram is the represent is the personification of the spiritual master, and quite something about the mercy of the spiritual master when he accept even persons of um, a very low character, like in this example of Duryodhan, and still don't give up, on that. So I don't know, some thoughts on.
Yes, and that was precisely the point that was raised. It was Srila Sanatana Goswami who drew attention to that point, that uh, it was difficult even for Lord Balaram to eliminate um, the hatred of him towards himself and Lord Krishna, and it was in the person of somebody like Duryodhana, and so that's used as an example. And Srila Sanatana Goswami drew attention to that point. So, and that's actually the root cause of so much of the bad qualities that are present in the age of Kali, particularly personified, and I think you covered it in yesterday's class, the heads of state embodying those terrible qualities that bring about so much suffering, that the pride, the cheating, um, the vanity, um, the pilfering, the stealing that's going on. And I mean, even in our American society in the present time, it's so apparent the bad qualities that are present in persons that are in leadership positions. I mean, recently uh, the huge scandal of somebody utilizing funds that were going to supposed to be used to assist in leading or assist him in leadership position, being used for purposes of vanity. So it's precisely what the point is that's been made, that and that was made, that particular verse that I'd read from the 17th chapter of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. It was in connection with Maharaj Parikshit having to deal with Kali too. At that time, he took into account um, the Pandava's particular merciful nature, and because the personality of Kali surrendered to him, he was such a magnanimous king that um, he didn't actually kill the personality of Kali. He was merciful because of the fact that it's part of Kshatriya etiquette that if someone surrenders to one, you don't kill them, no matter how heinous their actions have been. So that was the case even there. The personality of Kali, it was by providence, you could say, he was spared. And now the same point is being brought up. Of course, it's an earlier context that Lord Balaram himself uh, uh, showed that same kind of merciful nature. And that's the point you raising, the merciful nature of those functioning in the role of spiritual master, which is Lord Balaram, like the original spiritual master, that even with this connection being based on teaching a military skill, which naturally has to go along with all the emotional component, it should be loyalty, respect of authority, um, capacity to be open to negotiation. And you actually find that this personality of Duryodhan, he's considered the personification of Kali in actual fact. Everything you read, it's always something underhand is being done. Something is some kind of scheming, some kind of dishonesty constantly. So it's it was the point raised by Srila Sanatana Goswami, and hence um, this rather unusual thing, but it boils down to the merciful nature of the spiritual master and the merciful nature of Lord Balaram, the merciful nature of Lord Krishna. Of course, Lord Krishna is the perfect eliminator of what should one say, like demoniac mentality. But has Lord Balaram been merciful even to that personification of Kali, the personality of Kali?
Thank you, Mataji, for your class. There, there, there was there was one point
where you mentioned so-called love. So-called love. I was wondering if you could expand on maybe a little bit of that, because in reference to, or in relation to, how Prabhupada says this word love is only applicable with Krishna. I always think of prema, and then right there you mentioned something, maybe something about the so-called love and
I don't know if I remember the exact point of so-called love.
hatred and so-called love. As long as until a person can actually see the soul, then they're deal with the dualities of hatred and the so-called love.
Yeah. Yeah, that was just looking at this point that, Kali, or the age of Kali, um, the principles of religion that leads to proper love are lacking. And so those were described as being, or those principles, those religious principles that have to be there that will allow to lead to proper love, are practicing austerity, cleanliness, mercy, and truthfulness. So that has to be there. And the reason Srila Prabhupada was saying that there's so-called love is that it's just the antithesis to hatred. It's you have hatred and then so-called love. It's still not actually a balanced situation. One swings from the one to the other. So he gave an example of like how even when you have so-called love, like adherence to a particular leader or looking to a particular leader, then because persons are because the principles of religion are not being practiced, or the state is not encouraging that, meaning practicing austerity, cleanliness, mercy, and truthfulness, then persons swing to the other side. They're having love for the leader, and then they're having hatred for their countrymen, or those of a different ethnicity within the same country. So there's not equilibrium. So it's so-called love because the principles of religion are not being followed. There isn't cleanliness, there isn't truthfulness, there isn't mercy, there isn't austerity. So hence one's on a very superficial plane of existence. So it's so-called love. It suits your purposes, or it's panders to your mental comfort. That's somebody that represents what you identify with as in leadership. So, same ethnicity, same cultural norms, but not going to the, not having the practices that allow for elevation of consciousness, means that then one will swing to the opposite side, the hatred. So that was Srila Prabhupada's rather brilliant point, I think, because looking at this resolution of a conflict, are you really going to be able to resolve it if the principles of religion are not there, if the persons you're dealing with are not practicing austerity, cleanliness, truthfulness, and mercy? Are you going to really be able to resolve the conflict? It's questionable because it means the opposite is there. There's going to be cheating, dishonesty, vanity. And that's what you read even in how the um, Kurus were counseling amongst each other. It was with arrogance, vanity, and not quite truthful. And even the means that they employed to achieve their end, it wasn't a noble way of going about things. That six warriors pulled down a young warrior off his chariot coming from behind. It's not noble. So Yeah. So that's that so-called love that swings to hatred. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Padaswami ki jai. Thank you, Vajna.